It sounds good, right? Well, I'm trying to get people sitting down. You know what? I just tell you right now, Raj is not here, folks. And so I had to run and get the bagels, which I did. But they came a little late. So people are so focused on their food, which is a pathway to faith somehow. So give us about 20-30 seconds. We got plenty of seats at the table, folks. Plenty of seats at the table.
Making the minion later?
Plenty of seats at the table.
It's
Plenty of seats. Grab your bagel. Come have a seat. Grab your bagel. Yeah, at the table. We got seats at the table.
Thank you. Sure. You said stocks earlier.
It's just these people, you know, they can't stop talking to each other. Come have a seat. Come have a seat. We have great Torah. Great Torah. Come on in. Great Torah. Great time. There's room for everybody at the table. Stephen Harley, you guys do not have to sit over there if you want to sit at the table. We got seats at the table. I know you like over there, but
I'm back where I belong.
back where you belong, in the second tier. It's a cheaper seat in the garden. All right, fine. We have great Torah to study. It is a portion we know well. We're studying something we know well, but with a little bit different ending, a different sod. And I think it's apropos of this year of the journey and how it is we become a blessing. Share with me in the blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Amen. So this is, this is Mishpatim. It comes right after Yitro, Parshat Yitro, which we just studied last week. Yitro is among other things the giving of the 10 Commandments, and right after that are all this litany of laws, social rules, moral imperatives, civil and criminal justice laws, etc., and known as Sefer HaBrit, the Book of the Covenant. Why would they call it the Book of the Covenant? Because they want to impress upon us, it's given at Sinai. It all comes from Sinai, because remember in chapter 24, at the end of this week's Torah portion, what is Israel going to say? Kol asher diber Adonai na'aseh v'nishma. All that Adonai has spoken, we will do and we will hear or understand. So there is something important about all of these laws, all of these mitzvot, this whole litany in the portion. And when we get to chapter 22, verse 17, which is just before where we're going to be talking about, it's the second book of the covenant. Why is it not the first book of the covenant? Because unlike the beginning in chapter 21, these laws are not usually do not include the damages, etc. It's just like the Decalogue, like the 10 Commandments, laws that you should follow. The enforcement is human conscience. So that's why they're compelling and more interesting to me than the others. And I focused in on the repetition of two laws that all will galvanize around the Koshi. Why is the law against oppressing the stranger the key to our covenantal journey towards the land that I will show you? Remember Genesis 12, Abraham has to go forth, El ha'aretz asher areka, to the land that I will show you. Somehow, understanding this singular mitzvah gets us closer to the land that God will show us. Okay? Keep that in mind. This is not a lot of textual reading, right? I'm starting with Lisa, and we're gonna go right around.
You shall not wrong a stranger or oppress him, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. You shall not ill-treat any widow or orphan. If you do mistreat them, I will heed their outcry as soon as they cry out to me. And my anger shall blaze forth, and I will put you to the sword, and your own wives shall become orphans, and your children orphans.
Right, so, and the portion will continue. If you lend money to anyone among my people, the poor among them, et cetera, do not extract interest. The next law, you shall not revile God, nor put a curse upon a chieftain among your people. It all depends who the president is, but anyway, right, and so all these different laws, but these link together and they come back again in chapter 23, still part of the second book of covenant, with these Decalogue-like laws. Lisa, the next mention.
You shall not oppress a stranger, for you know the feelings of the stranger, having yourselves been strangers in the land of Egypt.
So what's so compelling about this? It seems obvious. Of course you're not going to oppress a stranger. Of course you're not going to wrong a stranger. Why would you do that? Your life experience, right? So it's not so obvious. Not so obvious, it may be not so intuitive to keep this law. There's something about this law. Meryl, do you have your hand raised? No. No, you just, do you have your hand raised? No. You have your hand raised. Okay, good. No, I thought Meryl was doing this, so I didn't know if she was going for her coffee or raising her. Okay, go ahead.
In 22, as soon as they cry out to me, so they don't complain, nothing happens.
Right, so always look at the pshat. The pshat is the straight text. We have to really comb the text to try to understand what I do wrong here. What I do wrong.
Just wanted to check.
Okay, all right. Right, so, right, so,
Give it a little power, or you never know.
yeah, no,
Wrong me and I cut you off.
right, okay. So, if you look at the text, first of all, why did I include, because I could have just put the two mentions of do not mistreat the stranger or oppress him, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt, but I included the next commandment, which is somehow connected to that. And Tom picked up on it, which is the widow and the orphan. It's a little different than the stranger command. Why is it different? Number one, they cry out. God hears. Ellen.
Hi, I just wanted to try to respond to your point that this seems very intuitive, but perhaps it isn't. Because when we think of child development, there is a period in infancy, which we in psychology call stranger anxiety, where a child doesn't want to go, baby doesn't want to go to somebody he doesn't know. And it's a very primitive feeling of being afraid of a stranger. So I think there is a sense in which this commandment is telling us to overcome that instinctive or primitive fear of someone who's different.
Beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, and it's good to have a PhD in children's literature and picture books, right? So is this maybe it's intuitive in fact to fear the stranger, Mike?
Yeah, and I also think that oppression and bullying tends to trickle down. So those who are themselves victims often victimize others, particularly if they're perceived as weaker than them.
Yeah. You look at some people who are well grown and you wonder, what's the motivation there? What's going on there? They may be working on a very difficult childhood or teenhood, right? Jane and then Susan.
To me, you're talking about, when you talk about the widow and the orphan, you're talking about, which at that time, or even now, to some extent, the most vulnerable population.
Yeah, I think still now.
Yeah.
I think mostly still now, right?
The most vulnerable population, so it's important to emphasize that.
Yep.
Because other, strong men generally can protect themselves at that time with a sword or a spear or their fist or whatever. But this is very important to emphasize.
Yeah, I'm gonna come back to your note in a minute.
It says, for you know the feelings of the stranger, but do they really know the feelings of the stranger? I mean, these are people who were so mistreated as being a stranger. Have they touched any of that in their lives?
Right. Therapy wasn't necessarily available back then,
Exactly.
but have they processed what they experienced in Egypt, or did they just run the hell away from it? Right? Would they just, right?
I just, one last observation. It's interesting that this is directed to men. And not to women. I mean, is there an implication that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a note, it's a good note, so let's just note this, so, the Torah is written by men, right? So we know it's a male, but I would say that in fact, the chapter 22 notes, or commandments of don't wrong or oppress a stranger and don't ill-treat a widow or an orphan are everybody.
Yeah.
They're everybody. However, in chapter 23, starting at the beginning of chapter 23, it's pretty clear that they're talking to judges, because the first four laws are about judging, and this second one is probably talking to judges, and the one right before it is do not favor the rich nor the great. So it's saying, and so this is in opposition to that in 23:9. And by the way, if you're connected to people, don't favor them, and if you're so disconnected from people. Because judges, strangers, right? So it's trying to say there's a big difference here, but I think it's meant for mostly everybody. Because
Just in the Hebrew where it's saying, for the feelings of the stranger, it's saying, the soul of the stranger. I think.
Beautiful. Yeah. So what does that mean? What does it mean? The feelings of the stranger. Great pshat, right? That's called a great pashtan, right? A pshat expert. So you're looking at nefesh. Well, why did they write nefesh? Why didn't they write lev? Why didn't they write? It doesn't say hergesh, feelings, right? Wait.
You also see the compassion of God toward the underdog. He's always basically with the underdog.
Yeah. So God is. You think these people have no champion? Come on.
Nefesh is the breath of life.
Nefesh, beautiful.
That's all we have. We're all connected by that breath. I mean, if you think of it.
Right.
That we're disconnected from God.
Why use nefesh? Right? Why use nefesh? Because nefesh is the breath of life. Right? That's how we were created in chapter 2, Genesis.
So in 9, it's interesting, just from a shot left, you shall not oppress a stranger, for you know the feelings of the stranger. I think that's a pretty big faith of leading, like, in other words, you're supposed to know that. I mean, it's almost like saying, well, if you don't know it, you should know it.
Yeah. Well, it's making an operative assumption. If you all came out of Egypt, you know what you experienced, and you've all had, right? And there's probably a lot of different experiences and different takes. So I 100% on a shot level, right there. So I'm gonna just do a little comb of the text. So before we even go to the remez, right? So look at the text. I'm gonna go into Hebrew. It says "V'ger lo toneh v'lo tilchatzenu." That's a code word. So tilchatzenu, and it harkens back to the beginning of the Exodus, because in the beginning of the Exodus, what's the description of? And by the way, it'll connect in a moment to something more. It says in chapter 3, verse 9 and following, right after the burning bush, God reveals to Moses, God says, and I have heard Sa'akat B'nai Yisrael, the outcry or the cry, Tom, of the children of Israel. The Israel's cry has reached me. V'gam ra'iti et halachatz, and I have also seen the suffering or the oppression. This is the same word. So the same key verb is used describing the slave's experience in the Exodus and describing how we should treat those who are strangers to us. So it seems like it's parallel. It's totally connected. And then going with the widow and the orphan, it's about hearing the outcry. Notice it doesn't say anything about hearing the outcry of the stranger. Maybe because it's assumed that we do know the feeling, right? That, even without therapy. And the second mention, V'ger lo tilchat, same word, Va'atem yedatem et nefesh hager. For you have known the soul of the stranger. Yadatem, of course, is intimacy. You have known this intimately. You have experienced it in your kishkis, inside. So that's the assumption. And the assumption is, and that should be enough. And it's not. I have Elizabeth and then Philip. We haven't even gotten to the remes yet, and people are asking questions. Go ahead. Elizabeth. Just gotta unmute.
Unmute, yes.
You're good. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. The whole idea of otherizing anyone is, very profound. You're saying no one is other. They're all us. Everyone is us, but especially take note of those of us who are the most vulnerable.
Yes.
That's very profound. I mean, because it's much more understandable, especially in other ages or whatever, to not consider that, to not other anyone.
Yeah, and Elizabeth, let's just pick that up. In the ancient world, how did you know who you were? How did you know where you belonged?
By your tribe.
Yeah. So you knew where you belonged by otherizing.
Yeah.
By
Right.
saying, "Oh, Mike,
Right.
he's in that tribe. I'm not going near him." Oh,
Right.
no. Right? So you defined yourself by what you were not. So this is not just right profound. I would substitute the word radical in the ancient world. Right? I got Philip and then Harry.
I guess that I would say that still applies now. It seems to be going on, otherizing people in that way. But I guess just two things. I scanned through the rest of the document to see, and I guess it looks like in this cover you don't have anything about the punishment, although I could have missed it because I just looked quickly. So my anger shall blaze forth and I will put you to sword, that sort of thing. So I'd be interested in what you'd have to say on that. And the other thing is that on the most Peshat level, so that's the first thing. The second thing is on the most Peshat level, someone could look at what's happening in current events with Israel and look at this and conclude that Israel's being punished. And since you're not addressing that anywhere in here, I wanted to give you a chance to knock that down.
Yeah, no, I will address it at the very end, though of course it all depends how you read reality, right? So, but I will come at the very end. So let's go to the remes, because. Yeah, Zebby, I'm sorry, I forgot Harry and then Zebby. Sorry. But we'll go to the remes in a minute.
I'm in control of the screen, Jeff.
You are in control of the screen.
Forget me.
Right.
Just a question on, so the portion keeps identifying us as Gerim, as strangers in the land of Egypt, not as slaves. So that's different.
Yeah, it is different.
And a different status, and it struck me here particularly because it is a shift.
Yeah. Remember the song of the Seder? Avadim hayinu. Avadim. We were slaves. But the Torah describes us as Gerim.
Which is, if I'm right, a little higher, it's sort of a little higher status in terms of rights and so forth, than a slave. Which the Israelites apparently had.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, or it at least gives us a different kind of status, I would say that. Yeah, Zebby.
It could have just said you should not wrong a stranger or oppressor.
Yep. Done.
Why?
And so Zebby's leading right into the remes. We're gonna go right now. And Harry, have another bagel, please. You're doing such a good job. So the question becomes, why do we need the added motivation?
Yeah.
And where does the added motivation lead? And what does it help us understand? And we're gonna come back to Harry's comment in a minute because it's right on target. So the first part, you shall not wrong or oppress him. You shall not wrong a stranger nor oppress him, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. Classic. The Rashi, very Rashi, and then we'll get his grandson. Where are we going? We're over here. I'm sorry.
For you are strangers. If you taunt him, he too can taunt you back and say in return, you also started out as a stranger. Pot, do not call the kettle black. Any use of the term ger in Torah means a person not born in the country he presently resides, or he came here from another place.
Right, so there's gonna be attempts to define what a ger is. So Rashi says, because Harry asked the question, Rashi says a ger is somebody who's a foreigner. That's what makes you a stranger. You know, you come from some other place, you're now in this place, you're a ger. All right. The Rashbam, Rashi's grandson. What does it mean? Do not oppress him. All right.
Do not oppress him to do your work, since he has no champion, as we remember it written. I have seen the oppression with which the Egyptians oppressed them. And since you know the feeling of the stranger seeing you were strangers, the severity of punishment will match the intensity of his misery.
Right. So what is Rashbam doing? He's extending the punishment for the widow and the orphan to the stranger that came right before it. He's saying, well, if the widow and the orphan get punished, you're going to get punished too. Because don't think God's not going to hear their cry as well. Okay, Jane.
I just think it's interesting, what Rashi said, is that because we all come from somewhere else. No one is actually, from where they are. We've all come from somewhere else.
Yes, without question, right? We are all strangers in essence.
You know, it seems to me to really understand what the meaning of stranger is, you have to put yourself in that position to be the stranger, to fully comprehend how your treatment would affect him, and ask yourself, how would I feel if that's
Right, so this is, I think, part of the motivation or part of the enforcement, right? You can't do it until, so now Jeff read Nechama, this is Nechama Leibowitz, lo tilchat senu, which means do not oppress him.
Lo tilchas.
Yeah, don't worry about the Hebrew. The verb lachatz.
That wasn't too bad, was it?
That was awful.
Thank
Yeah, that
you.
was awful. I was wonderful. Come on. It was wonderful. Go ahead. I'm kidding.
The verb lachas does not recur from its earlier appearance till we reach this text. The prohibition of oppressing the stranger is thus linked by verbal association with the oppression suffered by Israel as strangers in Egypt. We are bidden to put ourselves in his place, for it was our place.
Right. So exactly what Arnie just said. We got it. How does this get realized, actualized? You have to be able to put yourself in the other's place, right? Which is as Elizabeth said, you know, and Philip underscored, you know, it's so common to other today.
Yeah.
I'm quoting Toni Morrison, by the way. Toni Morrison gave lectures at Harvard, and she gave and 3 of them were on the stranger and other. Simon.
I just wonder, when you think about all these thousands and thousands of people all gathered as, quote, Jews, right? There's got to be people who you don't know. So aren't we also talking about other people that we don't know?
Yeah, and in fact, we came out a mixed multitude from Egypt, an Erev Rav, right? There were lots of folks who came out. And you could have been a stranger and somebody else in your tribe to their tribe.
So isn't it also helping us unify as a group?
I think it's definitely helping us unify as a group, but it's doing more. I like it, it's doing more. Well, again, now, so everybody's trying to define, what is a ger? What is the stranger? Steve, the Ibn Ezra.
The term ger is from the very ger, implying one severed from the branch.
Yeah, and he goes on, but he's trying to say, so, all right, Rashi says a stranger is a person in a foreign land. What does Ibn Ezra mean, severed from the branch? Last night I quoted Anne Lamott in the introduction to Michamocha, right? I love Anne Lamott. Anne Lamott writes about the hidden reality we do not see. She talks about walking by clearly on the West Coast, and she's walking by an uprooted redwood. And it's like basically cut off after 3 feet, but she sees the roots. And she says, this is the miracle of creation.
Yeah.
That we are all connected to a root system that goes far, way beneath us, and is always there, and we don't notice it. So maybe that's what Ibn Ezra's implying. He's implying something else as well.
I just wanna explain Gargel because it doesn't.
Yeah, go ahead, Gargir.
I
Yeah,
guess like a little seed.
yeah.
Really literally, something very, very tiny.
It's minuscule. Yeah, yeah. It's a little seed. So seeds are easily scattered to the wind. Keep that on the side burner. And then the Ramban, right? The Ramban, Mike, give us the Ramban.
In my opinion, the correct explanation of you shall neither vex a stranger nor oppress him implies that you should not think that the stranger has no one to deliver him from your hands. On the contrary, you know that when you were slaves in Egypt, God brought vengeance upon the Egyptians. In like manner, do not afflict the widow and orphan nor the stranger, for you can be sure God shall hearken to their cry.
Yeah. So the Holy One's gonna hearken to their cry, just like the widow and the orphan. Which is why it, again, this is what the rabbis would call smichut parshio. When you put one mitzvah against another mitzvah, they sort of go hand in hand. So God's gonna be present, but it doesn't say it in the text. Interesting. Okay. Still now trying to understand, what our motivation is, besides, as Zevi mentioned, all right, because we know the heart of the stranger, we know the soul of the stranger. The Malbim, and this is commenting on the widow and the orphan verse, the Malbim says something very important that we don't want to miss. Deb.
Rambam makes it clear that divine anger, Haron Af, is only mentioned when addressing all Israel in connection with idolatry, except for this passage. For such oppression is equivalent to idolatry.
So the implication here is not only mistreating the widow and the orphan, but oppressing the stranger is somehow idolatrous. Can be mean, but idolatrous? That seems a little much. Right? Is the Torah just going overboard to make us nervous? I don't think so.
Well, I think it's picking the lowest hanging fruit. This
Yeah.
is the thing that we can all agree is bad.
Yeah.
Universally bad.
Right.
And I was thinking about what kind of smart comment I was gonna make, because I remember from a few, and I don't know, this will end up being that smart comment. But it was many years ago, I was talking with someone who was from a different religious persuasion within the Jewish community. And we were talking about, I may be getting near what Philip wants to get to. We were talking about what's going on in Israel. And I said, well, how about we were all strangers in the strange land. We have to treat the strangers within us.
Yeah.
Because we have that memory. And he said, he said, well, the lesson I'm taking from that is I'm gonna make sure that we never get treated like that again. It came in, and so it's very easy to talk about widows and orphans. It's way more complicated, and from his point of view, he was clear about what the answer was.
Right. Yeah, and so, again, I'm not gonna go there now, but I think you're right. I think you'd say this is a smart comment, because it's saying, what's obvious is really not obvious at all. And the linkage of the two, ill-treating the widows and the orphans and God hearing the cry, and the stranger, the motivation, it isn't threat. There's no punishment in the Torah, at least. You could sort of connect them, but the reason is, the nefesh of the stranger. The soul of the stranger. Let me just do the next one. So we get back now to the second mention, which is exactly that. Notice what Robert Alter says, exactly what Susan said, right? June, give us that one, the altar. This is the great UCal Berkeley Bible scholar.
No sojourner shall you oppress, for you know the sojourner's heart, since you were the sojourners. The Hebrew is nefesh, life, inner nature, essential being, breath.
Right? So nefesh, he understands as essential being. He doesn't call it soul. He doesn't want to call it soul, because he understands that there are many words for soul in the Bible, at least 3, maybe 4. I think he is, when he says breath, why couldn't the Israelites get out of slavery in Egypt? Because they were kotzer ruach, because they were short of breath. So something about being able to breathe, right, helps you go beyond being the stranger.
So you're not gonna like this, but I'm thinking.
Okay.
When you meet a stranger.
Yeah, I'm sorry, yeah, no, I'm just,
when you meet a stranger who's the antithesis of you.
Yeah.
In every way,
Yes,
the Nazi, the people who are killing, but just for the sake of killing. I would submit that it's not possible to reach middle ground with them. I
yeah,
would
yeah,
say,
but I do like this, I would agree with you, I know where you're going, so here's the thing. This doesn't discount the law that if somebody comes to kill you, you should get up in the morning earlier and kill them first.
Correct.
Tom, you to quote, this is not about enemy. Doesn't say anything about, this is a human being just like you, who you don't know, and you could easily say that's a stranger. So we're on the same page. Of course I'm gonna hate the enemy, right? Ty started watching, I don't know what it was some kung fu movie that had Nazis.
so how do you get past that,
Right.
is what I'm saying.
How do you get past what?
That inherent opposition
Yeah.
that this person represents, that you can't find any middle ground.
Oh, so, but you're not talking about a mortal enemy. You're talking about somebody just different than you. Because if you're talking about a mortal enemy, the answer is this doesn't apply.
This is not.
Oh, okay.
This doesn't apply.
Right.
Right? All right, Steve.
I'm just, I know that, I mean, this to me is obvious. So, because it's obvious, like, I'm trying to get my arms around, like, to me, on the surface, this strikes me as being obvious.
Yeah,
It's not something that I could have, argued with.
yeah.
So why are we talking about it?
Yeah, so now I can't let any other comments go by. You gotta read Nechama Leibowitz. She's brilliant, right? Jane, be Nechama Leibowitz. Then I'll get to you guys online. I see your hands. Yeah, give me a minute.
Why does Rashi understand the prohibition as a threat? Because a history of alienation and slavery is by itself no guarantee that you will not oppress the stranger once you've gained independence. Do past memories influence the newly liberated to adopt an attitude of tolerance and love? Do we not often find the opposite to be the case? The hate, persecution, and shame the individual or community experiences in the past do not always act as a deterrent, preventing them from adopting the same attitude to those entrusted to their power. The fact that you were the strangers in the land of Egypt is certainly no adequate motivation. On the contrary, how often do we find that the slave or exile who gains power finds compensation for his former sufferings by giving free rein to his tyrannical instincts? For this reason, the double motivation, some will be sufficiently moved by the memory of their experience of oppression to put themselves in the stranger's shoes. Others will at least be influenced by the argument, if you wrong him, he will wrong you back.
Right, so she's going, and Nechama's going to that very question, and what Mike said before, which is, you know what? This is not the way of many human beings. To understand their own immigrant experience, to understand and to be so hypersensitive to all of those folks. And so, and I think we see it being played out in America today and in the world today. Right?
I think Mandela would be a perfect example of this.
Yes.
And as much as what he experienced, he didn't put on the people of South Africa.
Right, because he could have turned around and said, you oppressed us. Right, Mike, and then Ellen, and then Harry.
I guess I've been thinking about sort of the difference from sort of framing this, commandment to do good and right by other human beings. And it's not expressed as sort of a recognition of everyone's humanity. As it's not a declaration of individual human rights.
No.
And so I'm just trying to understand what that sort of gap.
Yeah, we're gonna bridge the gap in the drush, and in the soda, but there is a gap, you're right, because there is a gap, we're gonna leave it there. I think, I'll go Harry, then I'm gonna go to people online, hold on one second.
So I think Steve is a good Reform Jew.
This
This is obvious to Reform Judaism. But I always, when we see something that's obvious, you can say, well, so why did they bother to put it in the text?
Right.
Well, the first thing is it's maybe not obvious, right? But we can take it as obvious. So it is very much what Reform Judaism does in a sense. But I want to go back to this theme that Arnie raised in a way. It's not that you shouldn't you shouldn't oppress, you shouldn't punish. So there's some room for proper retribution for when you were a ger and you were improperly treated, for when the tide turns, some proper retribution. So in South Africa, they didn't just forget about apartheid.
Right.
They had some method for reconciliation.
Reconciliation, yeah.
And that's controversial in itself about how you deal with that sort of as justice.
Right.
But it doesn't give up on justice. So, and that may be what makes this passage harder, because it doesn't say, turn the other cheek and kiss my oppressor.
Right, but it is talking about literally the stranger. It's not saying, hey, when you go back and see those Egyptians who oppressed you, it's not saying that, right? Not saying that. I gotta go to Ellen and Ellis.
I just wanted to go back to try to understand the rabbi who made the analogy between oppression of the stranger and idolatry. And it seems to me that you really can understand that, because oppression of a stranger is a kind of dehumanization. You're saying this person isn't as human as I am. And idolatry is worshiping things, statues, and not worshiping the Almighty as an infinite divinity, as we who can be unnamed. So there's a certain way in which those ideas can be analogized.
Yes. And there's something even more, but and what you're implying is that when you don't, when you see a stranger and oppress that person, you're missing something. You're missing something that links you to the stranger. Ellis, and then Mike.
Yeah, it seems to me that they're just trying to disrupt the system. That the disregard for the stranger is an ingredient inside of a system that leads you to idolatry, that leads you to essentially a pagan structure that will involve scapegoating and sacrifice. And this is an attempt to say, this is where it begins.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah.
If we do not allow it to begin here, it's the long road from light to darkness.
It's a slippery slope. You're saying, Ellis, it's a slippery slope there. You start here, you know where it leads. Okay, Mike.
Just wanted to sort of just refine and rephrase what I said earlier. I mean, do no harm, do not oppress is kind of a negative covenant. That's very different from an affirmative covenant to help someone.
Right. Yeah. And by the way, to help someone is also in this portion, right? If you see your enemy's ox fallen by the wayside, you must not ignore it. You must stop and help them. But even with the stranger, we're going to get to a very positive covenant, connection moment. Zevi and then Susan, then I'm going back to that.
Oh, I just want to go back to, if you mistreat them, and then my anger shall blaze forth, and your wives shall become widows.
Yeah.
That's a very serious detail.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
something means that pretty much it's pretty sure it's gonna do it.
And what doesn't it say? It doesn't say if you mistreat the stranger or oppress them, you'll become strangers. It says you should know better. Susan.
Talking about you should know better, because what it says to me is you have such an opportunity to connect to yourself in a way that you couldn't connect before. This is something, when I think of God, I am that I shall become. You were slaves.
Yeah.
Now you can become more like me.
So somehow, how we treat the other helps us become who we need to be. Carol, give us the Alshich, and now you'll see what Ellen was hinting at, but you wouldn't know. The word ger in Hebrew doesn't just mean stranger. Go ahead.
A Jew should not say, if idolatry is so repugnant, what is so terrible if I hold it against a ger, one who converts?
A ger in rabbinic Judaism is somebody who chooses Judaism, who wasn't Jewish before, who was totally a stranger from us, from God. Go ahead.
That is why immediately following 22:19, forbidding idolatry, it is stated, you shall not afflict a ger. For you too lived once in Egypt, where you worshipped idols, and God does not look down upon you. So it teaches in 23:9, you know the soul of the stranger. That is, you know the soul of the ger, the convert, the newborn, like a newborn child in our faith, for you were gerim from Egypt.
So the subtle implication is we were gerim in Egypt, strangers, because we didn't know God. And we had to know God again. So we had to so we became Israelite, a mixed multitude, as Simon said, by saying we're part of this system. We're part of this faith system. We believe in, right, Adonai, the Holy One of all being, right, the breath of life.
When did the Alshech live?
Yeah.
The Alshech is Moshe Cohen Alshech, 16th century. He's a student of Joseph Caro and a little bit of a mystic. Maybe more than a little bit. Joseph Caro, the great halachist, right?
Were there problems with converts at the time?
He was codifying law about converts. He was helping to codify law about converts. Yes. Yeah, it all comes from, so again, I had to put that, that's not the focus, but you can't not hear that if you're in a rabbinic Judaism. It's not just the stranger, it's anybody who seems to have a different way than you. Different way. And now we get my favorite, which I translated from the Hebrew. This is, yeah, I'm sorry.
You know, it's not just a ger, it's also someone who lives. Eifo Atagar, where do you live?
Right, same root you would get living.
It could be just anybody.
Right. So that's why, so this is trying to say, it's how you treat everybody, which is why Mike's question isn't important. So Saba of Slobodka, the grandpa from Slobodka, is in Itzurei Torah. It's literally the translation. Tom, give us the side, and you'll get now how he's trying to answer Mike.
For you know the soul of the stranger. Do not interpret these words in the shop. That it's forbidden for us to oppress the stranger, since we were strangers and oppressed, and because we know the taste of oppression. Rather, because it is the obligation of every human being to feel for his fellow, both the simcha and the sadness, as if it is touched his very soul. And you shall love your neighbor as yourself, really as yourself. Our connection to one another is not complete without our ability to feel as if we and our fellow human beings are in the same situation with no distinction.
There is something transcendent about this mitzvah. There is something so important about this mitzvah, it guides our every interaction. The rabbis might say, and I don't know, I tried to find out who the grandpa from Slovakia is, and I don't know. I Googled it. I looked in Itzurei Torah. Itzurei Torah is a collection of Hasidic and sort of neo-Hasidic 19th, early 20th century commentaries, only in Hebrew. And yeah, it could be. But what's wonderful about him is he's saying something that nobody else is saying. He's connecting love your neighbor as yourself with love the stranger, because he says there is no distinction.
Right.
It's the same. And why, if you love your neighbor as yourself, the positive command, the negative flip side of that is never estrange somebody who could be a neighbor by mistreating them, right? So that's what seems to the right problem, Steve.
So, when you talk about a stranger, the first thing that you usually come into mind is that you can't trust them. For whatever reason.
Okay.
There's a trust factor.
Okay.
What it's basically saying is that, you know what? You have to treat the stranger as yourself, meaning you have to trust what they say. You have to get beyond that leap of faith to say, I trust you, and how do we work together?
Yes.
And that.
Yeah, I think not only that, but yidatem, the feelings of stranger. So you have to know that there's some kind of an intimate bond between you. That's not just, this guy, I don't trust him. This is, oh my God, we're connected.
Yeah.
That's hard. That's very hard.
You know, when we're children, we're told not to talk to strangers.
Yeah.
So to speak. And I thought to myself, part of the reason is what I guess you call the fear factor or the threat of the unknown. And that's part of, I think, part of what this text is saying is that you have to treat people as if you know them the way you know yourself.
Yeah.
Because,
Yeah.
because that's the only way that you're gonna overcome your fear of somebody else.
Yeah, as Ellen mentioned previously, I think there's a natural response. One hopefully grows beyond that response, towards knowing. What the Saba of Slobodka is saying is that our life interactions are guided by our ability to keep this mitzvah, this key commandment. I want to take you to now, I gotta have somebody online read. Michael, you want to read? Are you around? Are you having an afternoon tea?
Wine, it's wine.
Is it wine? Is it wine? Okay. I don't know if he's around. I can't see.
He had been on.
He may have gone. I don't know. Mike, you there or no? If not, I'm gonna have Judy start. Judy, you want to start for us? Just on you, Judy. So can you see it? This is Jonathan Sachs, and then he's gonna help us understand the crucial nature of this commandment. Why I believe this commandment guides our journey towards being a blessing.
There is nothing exclusive about the covenant, though you shall all the families of the earth be blessed. But there is nonetheless an insistence on the integrity of diversity, the dignity of difference, the preciousness to God of those whom the world ignores and mistreats. The faith of Israel declares the oneness of God and the plurality of man. It has often been thought that the greatest principle of the Bible is, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I used to believe so myself, but I have found that there is another principle yet greater still. You shall not oppress a stranger, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. It is easy to love our neighbor, someone like us who lives near us. It is difficult to love the stranger. That is why Torah commands us only once to love our neighbor, but on 36 occasions to love the stranger. A neighbor is one we love because he is like us. A stranger is one we are taught to love precisely because he is not like us. That is the Torah's repeated and most powerful command. I believe it is the greatest religious truth articulated in the past 4,000 years.
Right. I don't think it's hyperbole, by the way. I don't think it's hyperbole. Shady, you want to continue picking up with throughout history?
Throughout history, Jews were the archetypal strangers. Abraham says to the Hittites, I am a stranger and a sojourner among you. The Israelites were strangers in Egypt. Moses said, upon the birth of his firstborn son, I am a stranger in a strange land. They were strangers to teach us that God loves the stranger. They were different, yet God set on them great love to teach us the dignity of difference. Two ideas have sounded like siren calls through the ages, leading men to shed the blood of other men. The first is that God is on the side of the strong, the established, the powerful. That is why God chose a people who were weak, few, and homeless. The second is that somewhere there is a truth so universal that it is to be imposed on all humankind. But God chose the powerless to teach that he is not to be found in power, a people who neither shared the faith of others nor imposed their faith on others, to teach that there is not one way alone to God's presence, but many. A civilization that does not tolerate difference fails the basic moral requirement of humanity. A world that cannot live with strangers is a world not yet redeemed.
I mean, it's one of my favorite, it's probably my favorite book that Jonathan Sachs wrote. It's called The Lettering the Scroll. It's his own book, and he uses the 5 books of Moses to teach us what he thinks are the essential lessons. There's a chapter on each. But here he's saying something that's pretty out there. What is he saying? What's he trying to say? Number one, he's saying that you shall not oppress the stranger, for you know the heart of the stranger, the nefesh, the soul of the stranger. is the core commandment of Torah. Why? What is he implying? He's implying something big. He says it in the last paragraph.
So he
A
does,
civilization.
he
Yeah,
does
go ahead,
say,
please.
he does say, Rabbi, that there are more than one way to find God's presence. That strikes me as radical to many.
Yeah, yeah. So if there's more than one way, Philip, to find God's presence, what does it mean about the stranger? The one we think is different. The one we may not trust because, I think he has statues for gods. I'm not sure. He thinks there's a threesome. We think there's a onesome. I'm not sure about that. Well,
Well, God looks at him in the same vein that he looks at all of us.
So on one hand, we say God looks at it in the same way. Yeah.
But then we've got the notion of the Jews as the chosen people. So what is it that puts Judaism?
Yeah, I should have studied it this year. Yeah, I should have studied it this year, but I studied something else. It was last week's portion. It doesn't say chosen people. I mean, it doesn't say chosen people. It's a misnomer. It says you are a treasured people, or you are somehow special to me, right? Which key modern Jewish thinkers say, yeah, every people's special.
We're all special.
Yeah, we're all special. So chosenness, I would say, this actually knocks down chosenness and says something much more powerful.
Expelling is a very strong sentiment in Israel right now.
Yes.
Want to explain?
Go ahead.
Expelling.
Oh, selling.
Expelling from Gaza.
Right. Get them all out of there. Right. Right. Make it right. It's.
I don't know if they're right or wrong.
Right. Right.
But the sentiment.
You didn't rhyme, right? They want to make it right. Stephen, then here.
I'll tell you where, Channel Arnie here, where I'm having difficulty is that, when a group of Jews decide they're gonna settle in Muncie and be within themselves and keep out there, then, we gotta walk the walk and talk the talk. They're saying, no, this is where we live. We're not interested in other people coming in. This is our shtetl. This is where we hang. This is where we go to temple, whether it's Teaneck, New Jersey or. So.
Yeah.
I'm saying,
Well, no. So in fact, I think it's a good critique, which says if you insulate yourself and isolate yourself from the world, you cannot truly fulfill this commandment.
And so what I'm saying is.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you. Yeah. But if we come across that Muncie Jew or that Orthodox Rebbe, or it doesn't matter, and that's strange to us, we don't oppress, right? So it's hard. It's hard because we want to judge. The first thing we do is judge, right? So
So many years ago, Eric Yaffe was here, head of
the Reform Movement, president,
and teaching classes here, and he chose this very line to say, this is the heart of Judaism. So that's why I said to Steve, you're a good Reform Jew. This was the one that Eric Yaffe chose.
Wow.
But in reading this today, this is such a difficult, and I hate to keep bringing up Israel again, but I don't. That's why God chose the people who are weak, few, and homeless. So has God still chosen us?
Right.
Has God still chosen Israel? Because does this fit what modern Israel is? And this is, for me, I think for many of us, or maybe all of us, this is really difficult.
Yeah, very much a challenge. Yeah.
Israelis are not powerless. They may lack complete power, who doesn't, but this is not that view of the powerless to teach, so.
Right, so before we'll get to that, we got plenty of time today. I've done a really good job in moving us through. But before we go there, I still want to ask my Drosh question. My Drosh question is, why is this so transformational? But you've implied it, you haven't told me.
I'm not sure if this is answering the question.
Okay.
It sort of my thoughts are sort of going back to Mana, where it's something different for everyone. And so the strangers are all different and God is all different.
I love that. It's a nice parallel, which is sort of like, hey, it can taste like anything, right? So your taste and my taste are not the same, but it still comes from a singular source. Okay. Are you gonna answer why it's so transformational?
Yes.
Go ahead.
I'm gonna try to. When I hear what Harry said just now and why it's transformational, because in order to embrace this, it goes against every sense ability that I have in the current environment. So to try to embrace this and make what you talk a reality, it seems almost impossible, but
Okay.
yet Judaism a history of impossible. So why not give it a shot? The best way we
I
can.
like that. It's very Sode-like, but there's a sense that what Sachs is saying at the end, a civilization does not tolerate difference and fails the basic moral requirement. A world that cannot live with strangers is a world not yet redeemed. That's the clue.
Well, so maybe that builds upon it, what the, I was thinking about the command, that the description that people are created b'tselem Elohim. And that by rejecting the ger, by rejecting the stranger, we are rejecting the divinity that's in everyone. That's in
We
each
are-
other.
Beautiful. We are forgetting the
Which
root.
Which just builds off of what Elizabeth started.
Yeah, we're forgetting that animal Lamont thing that I just thought of. We're forgetting the root system. We're forgetting Gazoo. We're forgetting what lies underneath. My Bubby would say, "Gnus and Alphanemus, you have sneezed at the truth." Right? Right? So what does this mean for us? I mean, just our ability to in fact not oppress and love the stranger will be the pathway that brings redemption.
Yeah, but
That's right. That's now again, I'm gonna qualify. Stranger doesn't mean somebody trying to kill you or sending bombs towards you. But it does mean innocent people among those other people, right? So it's very hard. And it's in Israel today, very different.
Well, it also means people who are selling fruit on Broadway and 96th Street.
That's right. The guy who wants to squeegee your windshield, or the guy very well dressed who approaches you in a restaurant and you don't know that person. And you're wondering, this guy's a stranger to me. Why is he coming up to ask me a question? Happens to me all the time, by the way, right? I want to get to Wiesel. I want to get to Wiesel. One point. Yeah, go ahead.
But it goes against human nature.
Go ahead.
And because it goes against human nature, that's why the punishment is so harsh.
Which,
you know, embracing the stranger goes against human nature.
Okay.
So the punishment is, listen, I'm gonna kill all of you. They're all gonna be widows. The punishment is so harsh because it's so difficult, because it's against human nature to do that.
yes, but in the Torah, I agree with you, but in Torah, there is no punishment. There, not for this, not for oppressing the stranger. It's implied, well, the threat is the next commandment. With oppressing, what's the punishment? The punishment is, don't you have a conscience? Right, don't you? So let me take you to a Sode level for my and our teacher, Professor Wiesel. So we're going around the circle reading. Marilyn, read a little bit for us. This is Elie Wiesel. This was his address at the dedication of the Clow Library in Cincinnati in 1981. I was not there. I was a student in New York. Was I a student? No, I was out, when did I graduate? Yeah, I was a student. Oh, no, that's not true. I was his student at Boston University. I was his teaching assistant at this moment. I was not there. I was not even in rabbinic school yet.
Is that a Biden moment?
I have many Biden moments, by the way, so I feel for the guy. Go ahead.
Man, by definition, is born a stranger, coming from nowhere. He is thrust into an alien world, one which existed before him, a world which did not need him and which will survive him. A stranger, he goes through life meeting other strangers, and estranged from both himself and his world, his very existence lies in doubt.
Right, Wiesel always sees himself and frames himself as the stranger, much like the great Joseph Soloveitchik, right? Lonely man of faith. Go ahead.
On the sociological level, the stranger sometimes suggests the unknown. The stranger represents what you are not, what you cannot be, simply because you are not him. For the Jew, the problem is particularly pertinent and poignant. Since our beginnings, we have been considered as strangers par excellence. We have come to exemplify by our very existence other people's prejudices toward their own strangers. To most all of humankind, the stranger is the other. He is not bound by your memories, by your laws. He is an emissary of evil and violence, or of death, Surely he is from the other side. Thus, in many traditions, he was rejected, isolated, condemned. The stranger was sent away or somehow disposed of.
Right, Wiesel, of course, is writing from his own life experience, right? Go ahead, one more paragraph, and then we go to Korean.
To us too, the stranger represents the unknown, but the attraction he holds is one of fascination, never hate. Rather than absorb the stranger, we encourage him to remain true to his essential self. We want the stranger to offer us not what we already have, but that which he has and we do not.
So now Wiesel is gonna give you the Jewish, right? The almost Hasidic Jewish, but really the spiritual Jewish take on the stranger, please.
For the Jew, the stranger suggests a world to be lived in, to be saved. One awaits the stranger, one welcomes him. What was Abraham's greatness? He invited into his home all strangers, be they angels or fugitives, and made them feel welcome. In our tradition, the stranger may well be someone very important, a prophet in disguise, a hidden tzaddik, or even the Messiah. He is to be accepted for what he is, the way he is. Thus, we hope to receive a fragment of his secret, a spark of his flame. Our generation can best understand the terms of the covenant. We have been strangers to more peoples than there are on earth. Of all the divine promises to Abraham, only one was fulfilled. We have not become strangers to our past. Why didn't Abraham plead with God to save his descendants without exile, to spare them from slavery? For Abraham understood that the covenant contained a blueprint for life in society. To live without strangers would result in an impoverished system, to live only amongst ourselves, never facing an outsider to make us question again and again our certainties and our rules, would inevitably lead to atrophy. The experience of encountering a stranger is essential, where it helps us know who we are.
Then I skip like 3 pages and go to the last paragraph. Go ahead, Korean.
Of course, we are all strangers on this earth, and yet it is up to us to live true to our own life and to share it. For then one day, we will all gather round one who has not yet come as yet, but who will come. And finally, on that day, he will not be a stranger, and none of us will ever be strangers again.
Yeah, wow is right, right? What's Wiesel's understanding here? And I know it's a spiritual aspiration that Wiesel is trying to, put out there. What's he saying to us? Certainly as human beings, I wouldn't just say as Jews, I would say as people who, as Harley, just said in response to Arnie, who somehow know and can see the spark in the other, who might be a stranger, right? Wiesel's understanding is you cannot mistreat or disregard a soul. I was going to tell a different story. Should I tell the story? I'll tell the story and then you can respond. In 1978, it must have been 78. I was a junior at Boston University, and we were in Wiesel's class. It was Souls on Fire. It was about Hasidic literature, and I was going into class, and behind me, I may have told the story before, but it's worth it. I saw the guy get off the elevator and go to Wiesel's office. Class was going to start in 5 minutes. Who held the sign outside of 745 Commonwealth Avenue? Repent today, right? Before blah blah blah, right? Today's the day to repent. He had all these signs, and he was a little disheveled, and clearly, he was looking for, the end time, and he thought it was here. And we're waiting for Wiesel. It's like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Finally, like 20 minutes later, he walks into class, and he goes to sit down. And I didn't ask because there were only 13 people in the class because he only allowed up to 15, maybe there were 15. And somebody said, Professor Wiesel, were you meeting with that guy? And he said he came to see me. And we said, but that's the guy who's I think he said, that's the crazy guy who holds the Repent Today signs down. And Wiesel said, who am I to say he's not Elijah the prophet?
Right.
That was Wiesel's line. And then he just started teaching. And I thought, oh my God, disregard no human being. Even the crazy guy I walk by every day.
Exactly, maybe what he's saying, he might be the Messiah.
So he didn't just say, don't oppress the stranger. He's saying to us, listen, here, and he was living this truth. This is before he wrote the Gate.
Wow.
He was indeed saying, maybe I can garner or gain a piece of his wisdom, the secret that I'm supposed to know that I don't have. Because if he's so other, that should be a fascination to me. That should be a motivation to me. You know, he's so different than me. What can he teach me about what he does that I don't know?
That is amazing.
Right? So that's the aspiration. It's very hard. It's very hard because, right, we other, right? If step back from the situation in Israel today, our small group of 11, I think, just came back from Israel. Liora is still there, Rabbi Frankel, and she's, spending time with family for the next couple of days, and she'll be back on I think, early Monday. One of the people that addressed them, I believe, was in the Knesset, who is, an Israeli Arab. He's in the Knesset, he's in the government. And he talked about the importance of Israel and the importance of some kind of Palestinian entity. But, and one of the comments by one of the people was, I thought he was Israeli. And somebody else said, he is Israeli. So our first thought is we other. Our first thought is, what's different about them so I can make a separation, right? And what we might be thinking, which the text is compelling us, and certainly Wiesel and Rabbi Jonathan Sachs are compelling us, is what can I learn from them about myself? What can they teach me, right? About who they are that helps me understand who I am. We don't approach life that way, right? We lump everybody into one sort of big pot.
Yeah.
Yeah? Every Palestinian must be an operative for Hamas. I don't think so. That doesn't mean that the number was over 60% of Palestinians in a poll. What's a poll in Gaza today, right? Believe that what happened on October 7th was good. I'm not sure I buy into the poll, nor if I was a Palestinian, I would say, right, those are the people that are bombing us. They made me leave my home. So, whatever you do to them, right? So it takes a balcony seat to be able to look down on humankind and say, how do we operate in this very difficult, arena of putting up walls and instead try to build bridges? I'm gonna stop talking and let other people talk.
I'm just looking at the last clause of the last line, and none of us will ever be strangers again, and it reminds me a little bit of the lyrics to John Lennon's Imagine. And do you think Wiesel is suggesting that, as an aspiration, we get to a point where there really are no differences, or at least differences that we are, consciously kind of taking into consideration?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think Wiesel, Wiesel was a very, very learned guy, studied Talmud with Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, one of the great Orthodox teachers of the day. And Wiesel knows that in the world to come, everybody's gonna come to the mountain of God. That's us. So we're all there's not gonna be any strangers because we're all gonna celebrate, Pesach. Now, that's one hand. On the other hand, in the world to come, say the rabbis, all the holidays are gonna be gone. Because we won't need them, because we're all gonna have one big table. And it won't matter what right? It's all gonna be united by one. So it's beautiful. There's one holiday that's gonna remain. Purim. That's what the rabbis take. Right? We can drink in cross-dress. Thank you, Harry. Who invited you? Right? Yes. So
we don't have to keep kashrut.
Why Purim? Because Purim reminds us not to take ourselves or the world so seriously, and to realize that laughing and celebrating because we are so quick.
Yeah.
Right. So don't lose joy. Joy will be the operative feeling in the world to come. I do think what Will Wiesel is saying is so powerful, because he's saying the goal is just what the Saba of Slobodka said, the grandpa from Slobodka, right? In this beautiful commentary, our connection to one another is not complete without our ability to feel as if we and our fellow human beings are in the same situation. And then he says, ein hefresh, with no separation, with no distinction. You see somebody different and you say, I don't know what that guy is. I don't know who he is. As Steve said, do I trust him? Do I know him? Right? Right? The text is saying, you are him. So.
If no one knows Grandpa from Slobodka is, how did you find it?
Oh, the Saba mean, I could probably find out if I did more research. The Torah, which you should read because you love it and your Hebrew's good, is a 6-volume collection of Hasidic commentaries on the portion, all Hasidic commentators from the 19th and mostly early 20th century. So this is somebody like, if it says, you know, Berdichever, I know it's the Levi Yitzchak Berdichever. But this one is sort of like, I don't know, the grandpa from Slobodka. Who's that? You know, Ellen.
Rabbi, do you think there's any point in connecting this with the chapter on manna, in the sense that there, every person received just what he or she needed, and no more but no less? And it seems to me that so much of the strife deals with that, with people feeling that they haven't got what they need, or other people feeling so greedy that they take more than they need.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. Yeah, I think there's an inherent connection. I think it does, of course, naturally go deeper, you know, and where's it going for here? It's going to a hierarchical structure in society where, yeah, you know, all those people from there, they're strange to me because I think it's about knowing we have more than enough and knowing that other human being can give us something that maybe we do need. Simon, last comment.
The challenge today is that the stranger looks just like we do. We don't know what they think, what they feel, until we hear them speak.
On some levels, that's true, though there's a lot of people who don't look like me.
But the issue is that many people who look like us are strangers to us.
Right. Well, you're speaking in a socio-political environment or socio-political kind of way, where you're saying, right? So I would say this: somebody who thinks different from me, who looks just like me, is in fact not a stranger. That's somebody who, and I said it last night, could well be my brother. And in fact, I have people in my family, you know, and the Paul family, right, who do things very differently from me. They live in the border of New Hampshire. It's a different system, right? So I do think, I think that is the, right? What should we do? We should love them, right? Do we have to agree with them? No. Can we have a dialogue that is appreciating difference? Absolutely. In order for me to love them, they don't have to think like me. So it's a very, right, hard sell. And it may well be the only way we can ever bring redemption to the world and truly be a blessing. I give you this, you know, at this moment of division in our world and our country, to say, do what you can in your little corner. Sometimes that's enough.
Thank you.
Shabbat shalom. Good to see everybody.
Bye.
See you guys. Thank you. Thanks for being here. Shabbat shalom.
Bye, Jana.
Did I end here? Oh, no, yeah.